My guest today is fellow Texan Karen Tumulty. Karen is the national political correspondent for the Washington Post. Also, she's set to write a biography on Nancy Reagan, and I have connections to Ms. Reagan. Welcome, Karen. We're going to talk about a lot of things today.
Great.
A little bit of politics, and you prepared for and did the debate with Ms. Clinton. How did you prepare for that?
Well, the very first thing you have to do is make sure that you know everything that these candidates have said as well as they know it. Because you ask a question and give them a chance, they're going to go right to the talking points. And what I think a debate is about is two things. One is finding out things about these candidates that you didn't already know. And, second of all, kind of getting them to engage in a different way than you see them on the campaign trail. So, like I said, the first thing you've got to do is know everything that they have said, everything that they are likely to say, and then try and figure out how to put together questions that are going to, get them into a different place.
Well, it's hard to move them off of talking points, right?
It is. And sometimes there's a real temptation when you're the debate moderator to sort of make the questions too long, too complicated.
Yeah, you start to make a speech or a statement if you don't watch out. And I loved old Trey Gowdy when he questioned Comey, and he said, "We will make this shorter and give other people times if you'll answer the questions yes or no." Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then he asked the question yes or no, and I thought, I wonder why that doesn't happen more. But Comey cooperated till the third question.
Well, I don't know. I thought he made a lot of news in that testimony. So.
You thought he did?
I thought he made a lot of news. I thought he was pretty clear.
Who made the news?
Comey, and that it was I thought riveting testimony.
Oh, I did too. And that's going to be an interesting period. This whole thing is. Tell me, I know, asking you the question. Have you ever seen this before? Of course you haven't.
No.
None of us have.
No.
None of us have.
The only thing that I keep thinking, though, if this is what August is like, can you imagine what October is going to be like?
Well, and the other day somebody said, "Well, it's all over." I said, "No. Guess again. There is going to be time. It's going to be so much stuff." And they said, "Well, you know so much. Tell me what it is." I said, "I don't know what the stuff is. All I can say is I've seen the last year, and going forward and into this election, it's gonna just keep more and more coming up." Okay, now let me take you back right quick. Mm-hmm. You and I had an encounter back in '85.
That's
you
right.
were with the LA Times, and I was heading a team to try to take over Unical.
Right.
And you got in the middle of it.
Well, I covered it, but I do remember in those days, I think it was impossible to write a story about you without the word raider in it. So it was you were definitely one of the more interesting figures in the oil industry to cover.
But today, now that's 30. Was that 30? No, it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I was covering it for my school paper.
And I just got out of college.
Right, that was it. We're just going to agree on that.
In '83, I was 55 years old. But Raider. But today, if you were writing, would you use Raider?
I think that that the scale of the deals, and again, I haven't covered business in a couple of decades, but it just feels like the scale of the deals that we used to see back then was just, we thought, staggering, and now looks small. And I also think that, you look, that was, Silicon Valley was really kind of in its infancy. When you see the scale of the companies that have essentially, changed the way we live our lives that basically didn't even exist then, I do think, business is again, it used to be this idea that mergers were bad and scary, and now it's just like, it's like a free fire zone out there in the business world.
Back then, if you remember what I said, that we would put the company that I founded, Mesa, with Unical, and we would move to Los Angeles. They're bigger than we are. We won't disrupt more people, fewer people, but we will come to Los Angeles and we will operate from there, and that'll be the base of operations for the combined companies. But I was annoyed by Rader because, if you remember, and I don't want to turn this into me talking, but I'm going to cut this off right quick. But Rader, who is the Rader? I mean, the management of the company, I think they own the company.
Right.
You agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, in the end, it's the shareholders get to decide.
Right. That's right. But it was an interesting period. But today, that's changed. Immediately that somebody takes a big position in the company, they go on the board. They may have to do a little bit finagling to get there, but it happens pretty quick. And that's what we always asked for. They would never give us, even though we became their largest shareholder. Unical, we were their largest shareholder, and you couldn't get on the board. But anyway, you interviewed Fred Hartley, interesting guy and a real legend in the oil industry. Do you remember where he was born?
No, I don't, actually.
Vancouver.
Oh,
he was a
really?
Canadian, and he went to the University of British Columbia.
Wow.
But okay, let's go back to today.
And by the way, one other thing about Fred Hartley, though, is that, it was also an era, and I think especially in the oil industry, where there were still a few oil companies in the world that were really all about the personality of the guy who was running it.
That's right.
Whether it was Armand Hammer or Fred Hartley.
John Swearingen.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is also very different today.
And then that went away, and today they hardly know the CEO of the company.
Faceless bureaucrats, yes.
Okay, let's go to the biography. Tell me about that.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I've never written a book before, but a couple of weeks ago, Simon & Schuster, the publishing house, came to me and said that they were interested in getting a big biography of Nancy Reagan. And, I've always found her fascinating, primarily because she was one of the first ladies who she knew she had power. She didn't mind if other people knew she had power. She was her husband's protector. I think she was a fierce guardian of his place in history.
She could throw a punch.
But as that was happening in the 1980s, I think people were very uncomfortable with a woman in that role, with a spouse in that role, and especially with a first lady in that role. I think that looking back on her in 2016, or I've got 3 years to get this book done, is going to be a very different project than the time when the last books on her were written, which would have been in the early 90s.
Well, you sized it up perfectly. I mean, she was involved and saw herself as protector of the president. She protected his time, how much time he spent. She wanted him to rest at different times. All good on her part, but it didn't bother her, I don't think, how she was viewed, and I don't think it bothered him.
And because she had one agenda, and her agenda was him.
That's
and
right.
It was making sure also that he had people around him that she thought were in there for him and not for themselves, and who wouldn't take him off into directions that would hurt his image, would hurt his ability to, to do the things that, again, would put him into history where he is.
Well, my connection.
That's right. A big funder of the library.
Yes, but I had the fundraising role for the funds that will sustain the library into the future and all. And she gave me that, and it was, listen, I can tell you how direct she is. My role was to raise $100 million by the president's birthday in February. And so she would check in on me. How's everything going? Fundraising going fine, doing good. And so now we get down to we're in December, before February. So we're 3 months away from, and I said, I think we can claim victory, Ms. Reagan. She always told me to call her Nancy, and I had trouble doing it. But when she would say it, then I followed up with Nancy a couple of times, then I go back to Ms. Reagan. I was more comfortable with Ms. Reagan. And so I said, I think we can claim victory. And there was a pause, and she said, victory is $100 million. How much do you have? And I said, we have 95 million. She said, I want 100 by Ronnie's birthday.
Wow.
And listen.
Did you do it?
Yeah, but well, hell yes, I did. I did it within 24 hours. I called a couple of the big donors, and I put in another $1 million, and we had the $5 million. And I got in touch with her in 48 hours. I said that we now have her. She said, Boone, I knew you could do it. Yeah, I could do it when she screwed down on me like that. But I saw her as I think a lot of people did during their administration, said that she could, get tough. I don't know if that's it. I mean, she wanted something and she was going to get it, and she used techniques to accomplish all that. She was good at it, but I saw her when she could get tough. So
Oh, that's great.
well, okay, let's talk about what are we faced with? Is that the way to describe it? What you and I and the rest of America is faced with today is two very unpopular people running for president. And how do you see that?
Well, you're right. I mean, Donald Trump is the most unpopular, if you read the polls, candidate ever nominated by a major political party in our history, and Hillary Clinton is the second most unpopular.
He's more unpopular than she is?
Well, if you go by favorability, yeah, she's in the, her unfavorables are in the mid to high 50s, his go into the 60s and low 70s, depending again on who's asking the question and when. But the thing is that if you have an unpopular opponent, the playbook tells you to make the race as much about them and as little about you as possible. And so that would be a real formula for an incredibly negative campaign. One problem I think that we've seen out of Donald Trump is his kind of inability to sort of keep the message on her. It's not that he's not out there, talking about her, but then he'll go off into something about the media or something about somebody who ran against him in the Republican primary, or...
He's got a long memory, and he holds a grudge.
He does not seem to let go of those things easily.
And he keeps wanting to clean them up. I
right.
mean, somebody says something about it, he wants to go back and fix it.
Right.
And instead of just staying on her. And it's an interesting, the personalities, and I think she struggles with the same questions over and over and over. They keep asking her, well, but the other 20,000 emails and something like that. We're getting a little bit confused on the thousands of emails.
Well, people, and again, the polls show consistently, people don't think she's trustworthy. They don't think she's honest. But the polls are increasingly showing she's still ahead, despite that. That, that not only in every state that matters, all the states where the election is going to be decided, but also states that shouldn't matter. She's starting to either get close to him or moving ahead. And there's time. There's what,
I think a big part of his problem, and I, of course, want your reaction to this, but the big part of his problem, he doesn't, we touched on it, but he doesn't focus. he's moving.
He trusts his instincts. He makes decisions on the spot, split second, so that as much as his campaign will say, well, now we've agreed, we're going to pivot and we're going to stay on this message.
You think he agrees on that?
I think he will agree in the moment with people.
You're talking about with his staff.
With his staff. But I think that the minute he gets out there, he gets a lot of energy from his rally crowds. He trusts his own instincts. He trusts his own gut. And he will just take off on, again, something else. And very often we've seen he steps on the message that they had all agreed upon that he was supposed to be on.
Well, the interesting part is that the Obama administration has not elevated the people that they most desperately wanted to help. I don't think. Do you agree with that?
I think that the Obama administration has done a lot, but the fact is, and the economy, if you look at the number of jobs, it's growing. It's just that the income has never come back. I mean, and people, especially in places like the upper Midwest, just don't feel like their lives are quite back to where they were before the whole economy collapsed in 2008.
And it's not. I mean, the recovery's been very slow. Growth is practically nothing. I mean, we're almost at the level of recession, and I don't understand why. I mean, that we don't focus on that. I mean, to me, that would be a great deal more interesting to the voter for Trump to talk about the economy, and he talks about how he's going to restore the economy and everything else. I'm not convinced that what he's saying is going to. I'm not convinced that he has a plan.
Well, I think that most people who are suffering don't see themselves being benefited by the tax cuts he's talking about. Bernie Sanders got a long way by talking about things like free college or punishing.
That can't happen.
Well, it's people out there. I was amazed. You'd go to Ohio and people could really tell you in very specifics, very much specifically how this was going to help them. Plus,
You're talking about what Bernie said.
Yes, and what
Bernie said, he got up and he's giving things away.
And that's what Hillary Clinton was arguing. Although then now she has moved over much closer to where he was, just on this college, college. But there are just a number of places, and there's a real palpable desire out there when you talk to working people in the upper Midwest to see people punished who benefited from the financial collapse. And, that never happened either.
Well, no, exactly. But the financial collapse, it was huge. It was a real, but to me, what do you think the number one problem, what caused the collapse?
Well, it's, at least judging from what I've read, and it's, it was basically the housing collapse.
I agree.
And that was fueled by these exotic, strange instruments that were made up of a bunch of mortgages that should never have been written in the first place.
The government was pushing for it.
Exactly. It had been the policy of both, it had been the policy of the Bush administration.
They wanted everybody to have a home.
Exactly. That it's part of the American dream.
When you got your first home, how much equity did you have to buy that home?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I probably had private mortgages. I didn't have much money. But my first two houses I lost money on. So do not talk to me as the good real estate investor here.
Me, I'm 88 years old. No telling how many homes I've had, I have never made a dime on them. How you like that?
You and I must be the two worst real estate investors in the country.
I guess. Now, I said real estate in a speech one time, and accountant that worked for me, he said, Mr. Pickens, you have made money on real estate. And I said, where was it? He said, well, you've sold over 20 ranches, and he said, you made money on every one of them. That's real estate. I said, okay, a home. So it's not real estate,
okay.
but it's home. But I have lost money on every home I've had. I haven't even broken even.
That's great.
But I still remember that what my equity was when I bought my first home. I live in a house 1,173 square feet, which was my grandfather built for my mother and father, and in 1923. And I lived in that home until I lived in other homes after that. I got out of school. I was a geologist. They moved me around all over the place, but never was a house bigger than 1,173 square feet until my wife we had 2 children, and she was pregnant with the third one, and the house was 1,625 square feet. Now, I remember that, but I had to put up 25% equity in the house. And when you buy a house and don't have any equity in it, you don't have the same feeling about it.
Right.
And that I thought was a missing link, and that was a big part of the problem. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm finding this fascinating. Boone Pickens never made money on a house.
But I've made money on other things.
Well, yeah.
But houses weren't my thing. And see, I didn't have a house in New York, one in California, one Aspen or something like that. I have 2 houses now. I have one in Dallas and in my ranch. And I'm a pretty simple guy. But you came from San Antonio. You were born in San Antonio and moved to Austin.
I did. I moved around. My dad was in the military, but my mom's family goes way, way back in San Antonio. And my grandfather was a county commissioner there and county judge for over 30 years. So county judge at the very end. So that was really my education in politics, was South Texas politics.
Well, South Texas politics,
Yeah.
It's rough and tumble sometimes. And what was the guy's name from Duval County, the Duke of Duval?
Oh, right. I'm thinking of the wrong thing, because I'm thinking of Fred Gomez Carrasco, but that was a different Duval County scandal. But that Duval County was one of those places where a lot of dead people voted.
But you remember Box
13.
But do you remember what county that was in?
Was that Duval County?
No. It wasn't. People on a quiz will almost always say, no, it's Jim Wells.
Oh, okay.
And Jim Wells is right there next to Duval County.
We should probably explain what Box 13 was. That was the box that got Lyndon Johnson elected to the Senate.
That's exactly right. And it held out. They didn't turn it in, you remember?
And again, there were a lot of people voting in that Box 13 that didn't know they were voting in Box 13.
Well, and they didn't know how many votes they had to have. And that's why you couldn't get the count out of 13 when they found they got the right amount of votes. And yeah, that was a long time ago. And but I lived in Corpus Christi, and so Duval County. I was a geologist. Duval County was in the area that was assigned to me, and so I got in on the politics just because I was looking after the geology in that county. So you were involved in everything. Karen, I'm going to look forward to Ms. Reagan's book.
Well, I would really love to sit down with you and have you talk into a tape recorder about her for me.
Well, you've got to know that I knew them for a long time. I did not get to know her well until the library and the foundation got involved. But your publisher is the chairman of the Reagan Library, Fred Ryan, and so I see Fred often, and he gives me tips on politics, and he told me who he thought would win. I think he's right. Okay, having said that, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
It was a pleasure. much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
you.